Long before and during the European colonization of Africa, ancient kingdoms and empires were headed by women, including female warriors. And now more on that topic. Here's Reverend Sue.
Got joy in my soul. God is in control. I got Satan on my trail, but I'm singing all is well. He's attacking every day, but I'm watching while I pray. No matter the attack, I won't turn back.
Good evening, and thank you for joining Sunday Evening with Reverend Sue. This evening we have Dr. Carol R. Gibbs. He is a professional historian, lecturer, and author of numerous books on African American history, and he is a frequent guest of our show. And every time he comes, we are so blessed that he is right here in the Washington, D.C. area. And it's just a blessing to have such knowledgeable historian right with us. So we thank you, Dr. Gibbs, for taking the time to be with us today. But it's so exciting because we're still talking about the Woman King film. And as I was thinking about it, I went to Genesis, the first chapter, and verses 26 through 28. And it said, then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created humankind in the image of God. He created them, male and female. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So my question is, what's all the fuss about women with the blade?
Profoundly masculine cultures in Africa, but we also have, going back to ancient, we have astounding examples of the advanced notice or women. In ancient Egypt would be before the law. And we see this in other kingdoms as we move from ancient times to the medieval period and down in the 18th century. We look in many ways with the achievements women have made, the openings that some, let me repeat this again, some African society, and then there were those places, and Dahomey was one, where you had a profoundly, again, masculist cultural system, but at the same time, there were places for women to show their courage and ability.
Mm-hmm. So with the film, and I'm sure you saw the film, why are, and this is a broad statement of question, why are so many people upset about so many women fighting? No, they don't do that. Or they see a whole different of film, they think, and some people saying it's fictional, is facts or not, is facts or fictional, and not really enjoying it because they're here to say, criticize it. So you saw the film. As a historian, what's some of the things that we need to know right away about this film?
I think there are 3 points that I would submit about. Number one, many folk I've been talking about the Agojie for a very, very, very long time. They to know about this powerful African kingdom. Like many kingdoms, that's point one, the educational factor. Not to mention, you get a chance to see gorgeous Black women. You get a chance to see an or rarely heralded part of African history. At the same time, point two, I'm hoping that people will use the names, since the names did exist. There was King Gizo, who was not the kind of semi-freedom fighter that he's portrayed in the movie, but King Gizo, Nanisca, there was we find in the record a woman named Nanisca. We even know that perhaps the last known Agoji, who died in the late 70s, her name was Nawi. Her name was Nawi, the name of the young lady in the film. So I'm in favor of having people come into greater knowledge and then do research. If you want a strictly historical depiction, they are called documentaries. But absent that, this is Hollywood. They did what they could do. I don't agree with all of the agendas in the film, but in terms of acquainting people who did not know about the Agoji, and yes, they played a role in promoting the slave trade. They participated in slave attacks, and yet they are so respected in their own country that the government of Benin, formerly known as Dahomey, just erected a 100-foot high statue in honor of one of the leaders of the Agoji. Her name is Tangbi Hassi, but we don't need to go probably into that much detail. But you can go to Benin today and see 90 feet plus some inches high statue. Yes, these women did exist. They were combination Secret Service and Praetorian Guard for various kings of Dahomey, gradually rising in number, perhaps from 600 to about 6,000 at the time of the wars with France. In 1862, the British observed the Agoji fighting the Oyo and other groups of Nigerians and said that they'd rather have the women, the Agoji, in the battle with them than the men of the nation. Now, there could be some folk that are reacting badly to that. But the truth is that in African history, and I did a lecture on this past Saturday, you have great male and female warriors and gentlemen. You may not, warriors and generals. You may not see this in a lot of other cultures. Not only that, if you go to the Queen Mbandi Nzinga in Matamba, what we call it, Angola today. Again, she led female troops in battle. And in fact, in Luanda, in Angola, there is a statue of her that new mothers and pregnant women bring their babies to be blessed so that they can imbibe the spirit of Queen Nzinga. So if they feel that way in their own countries, it seems a little bit less than fair to heap nothing but scorn on this film. This film represents an opportunity to learn, to acquaint yourselves. No, they didn't get it right. But again, if you want it historically accurate as much as possible, go see a documentary on it. Or here's a revolutionary thing. I have a list of books just on the kingdom of the women that people say didn't exist. Just one quick one: Amazons of Black Sparta by S.B. Alpern. Amazons of Black Sparta by S.B. Alpern. That's one of the most accessible ones in English. There are books in other languages, French, for example, about the Agoji, one of many names of these female warriors of Dahomey. They were also known as Gabito and Mon. So there are other things, but I think that perhaps what may have gotten people, again, a little bit bent out of shape is that there are things in the kingdom that were used by Hollywood and given a softer edge. I can't think of a Hollywood film that didn't almost have that. Anyone that was based on history. So, we have to take the bitter with the sweet, and we have to use these opportunities to learn more about the history of Africa.
And good you said about, it's Hollywood film. I'm just using the example, the Tuskegee Airmen. If I had, and I've read a lot about, but if I had not known one who actually was a Tuskegee Airman, there was a part in that was not, absolutely was not true. It was strictly Hollywood.
Yeah, Red Tails. Red Tails is an example. I was criticized about this online. I'm sorry, Red Tails is the clue should have been when you didn't have anybody in there named Benjamin O. Davis, and that many of the so-called names were not names of actual members of the Tuskegee Airmen. And there were better films to recommend people who want to learn more about that fabled unit.
One of the reasons why I keep bringing up the film is because I hear men and women, or men, saying that is another way to divide the black man and the black woman, and they are sick of that in our society. I personally did not see a division going on in our society in reference to that film.
Again, there are too many examples in African history of women warriors. So I'm not sure. I guess they're talking about what they perceive as overtones of homosexuality. I didn't see any actual, there were strict rules that they were not to have, they were considered wives of the king, the Agoji, and they were not to have sex. Did sex happen? We have examples of heterosexual sex. For example, we believe that there were some women in the scene where the guys at the gate talking to the lady through the barrier. We have reason to believe that as long as you did not break the rules, as long as you didn't stay in the compound if you were a male, or as long as you didn't stay outside the compound if you were a female soldier and returned before regular hours, it wasn't 100%. It was not 100%. So could there have been same sex? Yes, there could have been. The same way we have reason to believe by some observers that there was heterosexual sex by a small number of Agoji.
They were there to be trained. They were there to focus. One thing Viola Davis said in an interview that I listened to is that when in Hollywood, when they mission and they want an attractive woman, he was talking about a little bit about her career. She knew at that point that she was out of it. She would never be recommended to play a part if they want an attractive woman because of her color, because of her darkness. But in the film, she noticed that there were jet black dark women. And perhaps now we see that there would be more opportunity for dark women to play roles in Hollywood. So there are some benefits in reference to this film. I love Viola Davis. She's a very brilliant woman. And I think that it is Hollywood, and she expressed that it's Hollywood. It's not a history film. But with that, just like having you and excited about your coming here to talk to us as a historian, I feel that is so necessary, and you can guide us like you just gave us a book to read, and some of the other things that you notice in the film according to your. Some of the other things that we can do as people who try to get to know a little bit more about African history.
Well, one of was the conflict, the war between the Oyo and Dahomey. That actually happened. That actually happened. There were continuing. Much like what would happen a few years later in Southern Africa. There were the movement each other. We were not living in perfect harmony until the white man showed up, and there were kings who expanded. Moreover, we must credit the slave trade. We have to tell the truth. And again, Giza was a main factor in that dislocation in that part of Africa. But his mother was caught up in it and he sold away from him. Look at this. This is not a one size fits all story. Not everyone on one side was good and not everyone on the other side was bad. But what gives us better reason to understand is to look at what actually happened, which is why I encourage people to learn the names, to understand that the situation in Africa on the eve of the scramble and the years before the scramble, when the Europeans were already in there, widening traditional competitions between various and sundry other ethnic groups, they were going to repeat that. We call it divide and conquer. And to an extreme degree during the conquest and colonization of Africa. And some kings went along with it, others did not. We have kings that came out of the Mani-Congo, the kingdom, Don Alfonso. We have his letters, Reverend Sue, where he writes to the Portuguese saying, back off, you stealing my people, you causing problems in my country. And so what did the Portuguese do? He asked for wheat for the Eucharistic host. He asked for wine, and he was never going to get this. He asked for guns, and they were not going to give Africans, despite the inroads of the Catholic faith in the kingdom of the Congo. They weren't going to have that. They were not ever going to do that. And so maybe he was a little bit naive, trying to get those things from the very people that are trying to destabilize him. And what we find in many cases is the devil's bargain. And what I mean by this, and I'm redefining it a little bit, on the coast of Cameroon, you have a group of people called the Sawa, S-A-W-A. They still there today. The Europeans, as they grew in strength and weapons, gave them a terrible choice. They said, we want captives, and we don't care where we get them from. But if you do not give us as much as we want, we'll come for you. And so the Sawa people in Cameroon, many of them formed corridors and kidnapped Africans that were not members of their ethnic groups and brought them down to the coast so the European would not capture the Sawa people. Again, a devil's bargain. Did Africans fight? Absolutely. One of the worst things we can say, because it's not entirely accurate, is that the Africans sold us. It's not simple. It is not accurate to blame everybody in Africa for this, particularly when people were given a choice between their very existence and extinction if they did not engage in slave trade. What we need to do as well is to honor those men and women who fought back regardless of the deal that the Europeans gave them, quote unquote deal. There was a king among the Baga people in West Africa who fought against the Europeans. Molefi Asante has documented 300 battles on land against the Europeans. In the archives of the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database maintained by Emory University, we have a chart that you can pull down offline. Africans were so anti-slavery, many of them committed suicide after they were forced on the boats. They jumped over the side. They had to put up nets to keep the Africans, so much that we hated in back in ways large and small. And we need to show the resistance of Black people to the slave trade, because we recently faced another reminder of how crazy things can be. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, recently said, well, wasn't nobody doing anything about slavery until the American Revolution. Crazy. First of all, there were Africans who were fighting slavery and the slave trade in Africa. there were abolitionists in the American colonies and in England who were fighting against the slave trade. So to suggest that nobody showed up until 1776 is an extreme exaggeration, or as the old professor used to say, a terminological inexactitude. In other words, a lie. But we're worried about that because they're trying to insert that into the school curriculum in Florida and other places.
And that's why, Dr. Gibbs, it's so important that we have a conversation like we're having this evening, because I think now that's the only way we're going to learn. We're not getting it in school. Children are not getting it. The high school students are not getting it. And even in college, you have some Black history, then you got to pay tuition for that. But the thing about it is that it's our responsibility. Like, you've always been on the battlefield. You have always been there for so long, and we have to continue to do that. Like the presentation and lecture you did last Saturday on brothers and sisters of the blade and bullet, great African generals and warriors. You talk about these things over and over again. So how can we, because we don't never have enough time with you, how can we again tune into your lectures so that we can continue to learn?
In addition to, I do a free monthly Zoom for the community, but there's nothing that beats putting the seat of your pants to the seat of your chair and reading. And so two more books, Women of the Leopard by E.G. Bay, and a series of books by a wonderful French Senegalese historian, Sylviane Diouf, Kings and Queens of Great Queens and Kings of Africa, Never Leave an Enemy Behind. Great Queens and Kings of Africa, Never Leave an Enemy Behind. Again, her name is Sylviane, Sylviane, Diouf, Diouf. This sister does not receive the kind of recognition she should, and I'll show you why her work is important. Right before COVID, I was called to a major high school in DC because the teacher had,
Yeah, okay, we have about a couple more minutes.
Okay, the teacher had asked his class, have any of you ever heard of ancient African kings and queens? And none of the students at this school, a major one in Northwest DC, had heard of any. So he asked me to come in and talk about kings and queens of Africa for 2 days. For 2 days. All I'm saying is that we cannot be lackadaisical about our history. Our history is part of our liberation. And if the kids are not getting it in school, take them to museums, expose them to books, and let them be in places that will acquaint them with their African history and culture.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We're going to have to continue to have you back again. And thank you for being so generous with your time and the information that you give us. And thank you for the books. Thank you for the books. Now I know what people are going to get for their birthdays and everything. Definitely. We have to start doing it. We put it right in front of them. Like I put some of your books in front of our young people. Now they know about Dr. C.R. Gibbs because they know about the history of Georgetown. They know about the inventors from you because as an author. So thank you. And we have work to do to our friends, our family and listeners. We have work to do. We pray. Yes, we do pray. But I believe that God will tell us to get up out that chair and do something. Do something. Learn about, who you belong to. But who are you? Who are we? We have to do it ourselves because we're not getting in the classroom. So thanks again, and may God bless and continue to be with you and your family.
Thank you, Reverend Sue. My thanks to Brother Mace and to Brother Mike, as well as your wonderful self.
Thank you so much.